You ever met someone who thinks the whole neighborhood belongs to them? I tried to stay polite. I mowed my lawn, paid my dues, minded my business. But when Karen parked her fancy white SUV across my driveway, again, she crossed the wrong line. So, I gave her a lesson she'll never forget. Before all the madness began, life in Willow Creek Estates was calm enough to make you forget that people could be petty. I bought my place on the edge of town 5 years ago. 3 acres of space, 1 modest ranch-style house, and a wide gravel driveway long enough to fit every truck I ever owned. To me, it wasn't just property. It was peaceful. Every morning started the same. Coffee steaming in a battered blue mug, the scent of fresh-cut grass drifting through the open porch door, and the hum of cicadas somewhere beyond the tree line. My wife, Emily, liked to tease that I cared more about my tractor than I did about my wardrobe. She wasn't wrong. The old yellow Massey Ferguson had been my father's, and keeping it alive felt like honoring him. I tinker with it after breakfast, oil, gears, bolts, anything to keep those memories spinning with the flywheel. The neighborhood itself was picture-perfect. Trimmed lawns, painted fences, polite waves from behind mailboxes. The HOA brochure promised quiet country living with modern community values. For a while, that slogan felt true. I helped neighbors move furniture, fixed lawnmowers, even plowed snow from driveways after winter storms. Folks called me the friendly guy with the tractor. I liked that. Then, about a year ago, new people moved into the big 2-story on the corner lot across from me. The Trumans. She introduced herself first, all perfume and posture. Karen Truman, vice president of the HOA, she said, as if that title carried the same weight as mayor. Her husband, Doug, stood a step behind her wearing the tired look of a man who'd already lost a dozen arguments he never started. Their son, Blake, lingered near the SUV scrolling through his phone, clearly wishing he were anywhere else. At first, everything was civil enough. Karen dropped off a welcome to the community packet printed on glossy paper and wrapped with a ribbon. But even that small gesture came with a warning smile. "We do take property standards very seriously here, Mr. Davis," she said. "Driveway clutter and industrial equipment can be a violation." Her eyes flicked to my tractor. I laughed it off, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. The first few months passed without issue. I'd wave when she walked her little white dog. She'd nod but never smile. Sometimes she'd pause near my mailbox, pretending to check her phone while scanning my yard for something out of order. It didn't bother me much. Every neighborhood has its watchdog. I figured as long as I kept my grass trimmed and my tools organized, we'd stay on neutral ground. What Karen didn't understand was that I worked hard for this slice of quiet. After 20 years running heavy equipment for construction crews, I'd seen enough noise, deadlines, and city stress to last a lifetime. Out here, I could breathe. My evenings belonged to sunsets, not traffic. The tractor wasn't industrial equipment to me. It was therapy with an engine. One Saturday afternoon, I remember sitting on the porch watching the sunlight hit the Mustang parked beside the barn. It was a '69 fastback I'd been restoring piece by piece. The chrome reflected the trees, the kind of shine that makes you proud of your own sweat. Emily brought out lemonade and said, "You know, Frank, one day that car's going to get you in trouble." I laughed. What's the worst that could happen? If I'd known then what was coming, I would have changed the subject. Over the next few weeks, small signs appeared that Karen's friendliness had expired. A passive-aggressive note about my overly rustic mailbox. A complaint about the noise from my tractor on Saturday mornings, even though I only ran it after 9. The HOA emails started trickling in with cheerful subject lines hiding subtle warnings. Still, I ignored them. It wasn't worth a fight. Until that one morning when I stepped outside with my coffee and saw her white SUV parked halfway across my driveway. First, I thought she'd just stopped to pick up mail. But the engine was off, doors locked, and no Karen in sight. I waited, shrugged, and walked back inside. Everyone makes mistakes, I told myself. She'd move it soon. She didn't. For the rest of that day, the SUV sat there like a white monument to arrogance. The delivery truck couldn't get through, my trailer was trapped, and every time I looked out the window, that shiny hood seemed to smirk at me. Emily tried to calm me down, saying maybe it was a misunderstanding. But deep down, I knew better. This was the first move in a game I hadn't agreed to play. I took a slow sip of my coffee, stared at the blocked driveway, and muttered, "All right, Karen, game on." If you've ever met a person who thinks the world rotates around their schedule, you'll understand exactly who Karen Truman was. The type who believes community rules were carved in stone just for her benefit. The kind who could ruin your morning with a smile that never reached her eyes. The Monday after she blocked my driveway, I saw her strutting down the street like a queen doing her morning inspection. Her little dog, Marshmallow, trotted beside her, leash wrapped in rhinestones. The SUV was still sitting right where she'd left it, half on my gravel, half on the road, like it owned both. "Morning, Karen," I said, trying to keep it light. "Any chance you'll be moving your car today? Delivery's supposed to come in." She stopped, turned, and tilted her sunglasses down just enough for me to see that sharp, judging stare. "Oh, that? It's not blocking your driveway. The easement is technically shared property. Section 4B of the HOA agreement. You might want to reread it." I bit my tongue. I'd read the HOA handbook twice before moving in. There was no shared easement. She was bluffing, but she did it with such confidence you almost wanted to believe her. "Well, maybe you could still move it a little," I said evenly. "The delivery guy's got a trailer," she interrupted with a laugh. "Oh, come on, Frank. Don't make a fuss. It's just for the day. You have plenty of space." She turned and walked off before I could respond. That was the moment I realized what kind of person I was dealing with. She wasn't just entitled, she was deliberately difficult. The kind who finds satisfaction in testing how far she can push someone before they snap. That evening, when I finally got the delivery rescheduled, I saw her out front again chatting with another neighbor, Mrs. Patterson. Every few seconds, they'd both glance toward my house, whispering and smiling. I didn't have to hear the words to know they weren't complimenting my lawn. Emily joined me on the porch. "She's talking about you again," she said quietly. I nodded. Let her. Sooner or later, she'll run out of stories. But she didn't. A few days later, I got my first HOA friendly reminder letter, printed in bold italics, signed by Vice President Karen Truman. Friendly reminder, driveway maintenance standards. "Dear Mr. Davis, the HOA has noticed excessive gravel runoff from your driveway creating a visual inconsistency with surrounding properties. Please address this to maintain community harmony." Community harmony. That phrase stuck in my head like a bad tune. I stepped outside, looked at my driveway. Clean, level, better than most on the block. Gravel runoff? She was inventing violations now. Over the next week, the letters kept coming. Unapproved equipment visible from the street. Unauthorized vehicle repairs. Lawn trimming variants. Each one more ridiculous than the last. And always signed with her name, elegant cursive, like she was proud of every word. I tried to handle it the calm way. I called the HOA office. The secretary on the line sounded exhausted. "Yeah," she said. "We've had a few complaints from Mrs. Truman lately. You're not the only one." That made me feel a little better. Misery loves company. Then she added, "But she's got the president's ear. Best advice? Just keep everything spotless. She'll move on eventually." Spoiler, she didn't. Saturday morning rolled around again. I fired up the tractor, as I did every weekend, to pull out a few tree stumps at the edge of my property. 10 minutes later, I heard the screech of tires and saw her SUV pull up. Out stepped Karen. Robe fluttering, dog barking, hair perfectly styled for someone accidentally showing up. She marched straight toward me, waving her phone like a sword. "Frank, you can't operate heavy machinery on residential property without HOA approval." I killed the engine and looked at her. "It's a tractor, Karen. It's quieter than your SUV." "That's not the point," she said, already taking pictures. "This is supposed to be a peaceful neighborhood. You're disturbing the tranquility." I looked around at the empty street. What tranquility? It's 9 a.m. on a Saturday. "Exactly," she snapped. "People are relaxing." I laughed under my breath. And here I thought I was being productive. That pushed her over the edge. She turned to her phone and started recording. Everyone. This man is operating unapproved machinery in a residential zone. I'll be filing another report with the HOA and possibly the city. Be my guest, I said. Maybe they'll help you move your car next time. Her jaw dropped. For once, she didn't have a quick comeback. She stomped off, muttering something about disrespectful neighbors, while her dog yipped behind her. That night, Emily found me sitting in the garage, wiping grease from my hands. She's never going to stop, is she? Emily asked. I shook my head. No, not until she wins something. Then what do you plan to do? I smiled faintly. Wait for her to make the wrong move. And deep down, I knew it wouldn't take long. People like Karen can't resist crossing their own lines. By the next weekend, I'd learned something about Karen. She didn't just crave control. She fed on reaction. If you ignored her, she'd double down until you looked her way. And if you pushed back, well, that's when she got creative. That Friday evening, I came home from work later than usual. The sun was already dipping behind the maples, throwing long orange streaks across my driveway. I was tired, dusty, and ready for nothing but dinner and a quiet night on the porch with Emily. But there it was. Karen's white Lexus SUV, parked sideways at the end of my driveway, blocking both lanes completely. It looked deliberate, like she'd measured the angle for maximum irritation. At first, I thought maybe she'd just stopped to talk to someone. I looked around. The street was empty. Then I checked my phone, no missed calls, no texts. I walked closer and saw a piece of paper wedged under the windshield wiper. A bright yellow HOA notice. The headline read, Reminder, Property Cleanliness Standards, Section 5A. I blinked. Seriously? I looked over and saw her standing at the corner, pretending to chat on her phone but clearly watching my reaction. When she noticed I'd seen her, she smiled. That smug, cat-got-the-cream smile that made my blood pressure rise 10 points instantly. I picked up the paper and read the fine print. It accused me of leaving visible debris near driveway edges. The debris? A few wood shavings from when I'd cut planks for a chicken coop earlier that week. Nothing worth mentioning, but enough for her to weaponize her clipboard again. I took a slow breath, walked toward her and said, Karen, could you please move your car? I need to park. She didn't even look guilty. Oh, this won't take long. I'm just doing a quick survey for next month's HOA meeting. You don't mind, do you? I gestured toward the blocked space. Yeah, I actually do mind. You're parked across my driveway. She sighed like I just asked her to move a mountain. Frank, it's community property. Technically, the HOA maintains this section of the street. If you had any concerns, you should have brought them up at the meeting last quarter. I kept my tone steady. And if you don't move it in the next minute, I'll call a tow truck. We'll see what they think about community property. That cracked her composure. You wouldn't dare, she said, clutching her keys. I shrugged. Try me. She hesitated, then, with a dramatic huff, stormed back to the SUV, got in, and backed it up about 6 inches. 6. Then she turned off the engine again and walked away. Problem solved, she called over her shoulder. Emily stepped out from the porch just in time to see me staring at the car in disbelief. Is she serious? She asked. I laughed without humor. Apparently, that's her version of compromise. That night I couldn't shake it off. Not because of the car, but because of what it meant. She wasn't just being rude anymore. She was testing boundaries, seeing how far she could push. I dealt with bullies before, at job sites, in business deals, and they all had one thing in common. They mistook patience for weakness. The next morning, I decided to document everything. Photos, timestamps, notes, the whole 9 yards. It felt petty, but I knew people like her respected only one thing: proof. When I stepped outside to snap a few photos, Karen was already out there with her dog. She smirked. Oh, taking pictures now? Planning to make a scrapbook? Something like that, I said calmly. Gotta preserve the memories. She narrowed her eyes. You really should relax, Frank. Stress isn't good at your age. I smiled back. Neither is meddling. But here we are. Her lips tightened. She walked away, muttering something about non-compliant homeowners. Later that week, I got another email from the HOA. This one titled, Notice of Potential Fines. Apparently, Karen had filed an official complaint stating that my tractor constituted an eyesore when parked outside the barn. Emily read it over my shoulder. An eyesore? It's a tractor, not a junkyard. I nodded. She's just warming up. And she was. Over the next few days, she'd drive by slow, roll her window down, and pretend to check her clipboard. Every time I waved, she'd look away, like I didn't exist. But behind that cold act, I could feel it. She was building up to something bigger. That weekend, I stood in my driveway, sipping coffee and staring at the faint tire marks she'd left behind. The smell of fresh-cut grass mixed with diesel from the tractor. And for the first time since moving to Willow Creek, I felt a twinge of resentment toward my own peace. I muttered to myself, "You picked the wrong driveway, Karen," because deep down I already knew. Sooner or later, she'd cross a line that couldn't be ignored. And when she did, I'd be ready. A week later, I learned that patience isn't always a virtue. It's bait. Karen must have sensed that my silence after her little parking stunt meant she hadn't gotten under my skin enough. So, like any self-appointed queen of the cul-de-sac, she raised the stakes. Started small as always. A friendly reminder email about my lawn maintenance schedule. Then another about my visible workshop tools. I half expected her next message to complain about my oxygen consumption. But the real fireworks started one quiet Sunday morning. Emily and I were sipping coffee on the porch when we heard the sound of gravel crunching. A sound I'd grown to associate with incoming trouble. Sure enough, Karen's white Lexus rolled to a stop right across from our mailbox. She got out wearing a sun hat that looked like it cost more than my tractor's transmission, holding a clipboard like a weapon. "Good morning," she called in a tone so sugary it could rot teeth. "Morning," I replied cautiously. She sauntered closer, stopping at the edge of my driveway. "Just wanted to give you a little heads up. We've received multiple complaints about noise and unsightly equipment on your property." I raised an eyebrow. "Multiple complaints, huh? From who?" She smiled. "Anonymous, of course. We take all reports seriously." "Of course you do," I said, setting my coffee down. "And let me guess, you'll be handling the investigation personally?" "Just doing my duty," she said with mock modesty. "It's nothing personal, Frank. We simply want to preserve the character of our neighborhood." "The neighborhood's doing fine," I said evenly. "You're the only one who's miserable." Her fake smile flickered. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," I said. "I've been here for years without a problem. Then you show up and suddenly everyone's getting letters, fines, and warnings. Maybe the problem isn't the community. It's the committee." That hit a nerve. Her smile disappeared completely. "If you're implying that I'm misusing my position, I'll remind you that the HOA can fine you up to $200 per violation." I chuckled. "You can fine me for breaking a rule. You can't fine me for existing." Karen's lips pressed into a thin line. "We'll see about that." She spun on her heel and walked off, her little dog yapping like a punctuation mark to her threat. By the next week, I knew she meant it. The first notice of violation came Tuesday, $50 for improper storage of utility vehicle. Then Friday, $100 for unapproved landscaping. And Monday, just to round things out, $200 for excessive driveway usage. Driveway usage. I didn't even know that was a thing. I called the HOA hotline, a weary voice on the other end sighed when I mentioned her name. "You can appeal it, sir. But the vice president has to sign off on appeals." "Let me guess," I said. "That would be Karen." "Yes, sir." I hung up. Emily looked at me across the kitchen table. "She's not stopping, Frank." "No," I said. "But she's slipping." Because while Karen thought she was tightening the noose, what she didn't realize was that she was leaving a paper trail. Emails. Fines. All with her digital signature. I was saving every one. One evening, as the sun went down, I caught her talking to a group of neighbors by the corner mailbox. Their voices were low, but I could tell she was selling her version of events. Her hands waved dramatically, and every now and then, someone would glance my way with that mix of pity and suspicion. Emily came out with 2 glasses of iced tea. She's spreading stories again. Let her, I said. Every lie has a shelf life. She's turning people against you. I smiled. Then I'll give them something real to talk about. The next morning, I found another letter on my doorstep. No envelope, just folded neatly with my name scribbled on top. Frank, please be careful. Karen's trying to get you fined enough to file a lien. You're not her first target. A friend. That was the first time I realized this wasn't just about me. She'd been doing this for months, bullying anyone who questioned her authority, using HOA policy like a weapon. But her arrogance blinded her to one critical detail. She was dealing with someone who'd spent 20 years in construction management, where paperwork and regulations were half the job. I knew the system better than she did. So instead of reacting, I got smart. I filed my own complaints, proper ones, through official channels, about her unauthorized use of HOA funds for beautification projects. I asked for meeting transcripts and spending records, all under the homeowner transparency clause she'd probably forgotten existed. 2 days later, I got an email from the HOA treasurer. Mr. Davis, we're reviewing your request. Please note that Vice President Truman has been using a separate approval process for recent expenditures. Separate approval process. I smiled. There it was, the crack in her armor. That night, I was out in the garage tightening bolts on the tractor when Emily appeared at the door. She's at it again, she said. Parked her SUV right across the entrance. I wiped my hands and grinned. Good. Good. I nodded. Because that's the move I've been waiting for. Emily frowned. Frank, don't do anything stupid. Don't worry, I said, grabbing my gloves. I'm just going to move the problem out of the way. The following week felt like walking through a minefield you couldn't see. Quiet, calm, but you just knew something was waiting to blow. Karen's SUV was gone the next morning, which should have been a relief. Instead, it felt like the calm before a storm. Emily sensed it too. She's up to something, she said over breakfast. She's been too quiet. She was right. That afternoon, I checked my email and nearly spilled my coffee. HOA Vice President, Willow Creek Estates. Notice of escalation, repeated violations. Dear Mr. Davis, the HOA board has determined that continued non-compliance with property standards constitutes grounds for disciplinary action, including possible suspension of privileges and legal collection for outstanding fines. Attached were screenshots of my supposed violations. The tractor, the Mustang project, even a photo of my trash bins lined up for pickup. Each image was time-stamped and marked evidence. She wasn't even hiding it anymore. I scrolled down to the signature line, Vice President, HOA Board, Karen Truman. Emily looked over my shoulder. She took pictures of our garbage cans? Looks that way. She's insane. I nodded. Persistent, too. The next HOA meeting was that Thursday, and for the first time since moving in, I decided to attend. When I walked into the community hall, the air was thick with perfume, coffee, and tension. About 20 neighbors sat in folding chairs. Karen stood near the front table, smiling like a politician at a press conference. Ah, Mr. Davis, she said loudly when she saw me. Glad you could join us tonight. I smiled back. Wouldn't miss it. The meeting started with the usual fluff, budget updates, landscaping projects, and pool maintenance. Then Karen cleared her throat and said, Next order of business. Repeated violations by resident Frank Davis regarding property appearance and machinery use. Every head turned my way. I leaned back, calm as a lake. You mean my tractor? She nodded smugly. Among other things. Karen, I said slowly, do you have documentation for those claims? Of course, she said, waving her clipboard. Photographic evidence. And where were those photos taken from? I asked. Her smile faltered. Excuse me, because if any of them were taken on my property, that's trespassing. And if you shared them publicly without consent, that's a privacy violation. A few murmurs rippled through the crowd. Karen's confident tone wavered. It's standard HOA procedure. No, I interrupted. It's your procedure. There's no mention of random surveillance in the bylaws. The HOA president, a soft-spoken man named Greg, looked uncomfortable. Maybe we should review the documentation. Karen cut him off. Greg, please. We have rules to enforce. This isn't personal. I smiled faintly. Sure it's not. Then I stood up, walked to the table, and dropped a folder in front of her. Inside were printouts of her emails, timestamps of her fines, and 2 pages of the HOA code, highlighted in yellow. I've kept records too, I said evenly. Every notice, every email, every fine. Funny thing, not one of them follows the HOA appeal process or board voting requirements. You've been signing and sending them alone. She went pale. That's ridiculous. Greg frowned. Karen, is that true? She stammered. Well, someone has to handle administrative tasks. That's not administration, I said. That's abuse of position. You could feel the air shift. A few neighbors looked at her differently now, the first cracks forming in her armor. But Karen wasn't done. She drew herself up and snapped. You think you can intimidate me? I'm acting within my rights. I smiled. And I'm acting within mine. I'll be submitting this folder to the HOA legal representative tomorrow. Let's see whose rights hold up. Then I turned and walked out. The next day I got another email, short, angry, and desperate. HOA Vice President Karen Truman, you've made a mistake. Frank, you're making this harder on yourself. Drop this nonsense, pay your fines, and let's move forward peacefully. It wasn't signed Vice President this time, just Karen. That told me one thing. She was losing control. That weekend, Emily and I were enjoying a quiet breakfast when we heard the sound of tires again. This time, screeching. We looked out the window and froze. Karen's white SUV sat across the entrance to my driveway again. Only this time, it was parked completely sideways, blocking me in from both directions. Emily gasped. She didn't. Oh, she did, I said, standing. Karen got out, arms crossed, smirk painted across her face. I told you, she said. You can't operate that tractor without HOA authorization, so I'm preventing another violation. I stared at her, half in disbelief, half in amusement. You're blocking a homeowner's access to his own property, Karen. That's illegal. Call the police then, she said, smiling wider. Maybe they'll remind you of the rules. I stepped closer, calm and measured. You sure that's what you want? I'm positive, she said. She didn't know it, but that was the exact sentence that sealed her fate. Because calling the police was exactly what I was going to do, just not for the reason she thought. That night, while she slept smugly in her castle of HOA power, I sat in my garage, wiping the grease off my tractor's controls. Emily leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. You've got that look again. Which look? The one that says you're about to do something satisfying and slightly illegal. I grinned. Oh, not illegal. Just corrective. She sighed, shaking her head. Just don't end up on the news. I chuckled. If I do, it'll be for something worth watching. And in that moment, the plan started forming, clear, simple, poetic. The next time Karen blocked my driveway, she wouldn't just get a fine. She'd get a lesson she'd never forget. The next few days were eerily calm. No emails, no notes, no friendly reminders. It was almost like Karen had moved on. Emily called it a false peace. I called it reloading. Then Friday arrived. I was expecting a delivery that morning. A heavy shipment of lumber for the new workshop I'd been building behind the barn. The driver called me at 9 a.m. and said he'd be there by 10. I made sure the driveway was clear, the gate unlocked, and even trimmed a few branches to make his turn easier. At 9:45, I heard the low growl of a diesel truck in the distance. Then, another sound. Tires on gravel. I looked out the window, and my stomach dropped. There it was again. Karen's white Lexus, parked completely sideways across the mouth of my driveway. This time, it wasn't accidental or temporary. She'd parked it like a barricade. Emily came up behind me. You've got to be kidding me. Oh, she's kidding no one, I said. By the time I walked outside, the delivery truck had already arrived. A huge flatbed idling on the road, the driver leaning out of the window looking confused. Hey, you Davis? He shouted. Yeah. Can't get in, man. That thing's blocking the whole drive. I turned to see Karen standing in her yard, arms crossed, sipping coffee like she was watching a show. Morning, Frank, she called sweetly. Hope you don't mind. I'm having guests over. Needed the extra space for parking. On my driveway? I asked, forcing a smile. It's community access, remember? She said with that same smug tilt of her chin. The truck driver looked from her to me, clearly uncomfortable. Want me to wait? I sighed. Yeah, just a minute. I walked over to her fence line, keeping my voice calm. Karen, you know this is illegal, right? Blocking a residential driveway is a citation-worthy offense. She smiled wider. Then call the cops. Maybe they'll side with you this time. It took everything in me not to laugh. You sure you want that, Karen? She shrugged. Do what you have to do. I'll be inside. Then she turned, strutted up her walkway, and disappeared into her house. Emily appeared beside me, arms folded. She's daring you. I know. So what are you going to do? Exactly what she asked. I pulled out my phone and called the local sheriff's department, not the city police. I still had friends there. Sheriff's office, Deputy Lyle speaking. Hey, Lyle. It's Frank Davis. There was a pause, then a chuckle. The Frank Davis? How's retirement treating you? Quiet until now, I said. Got a situation. HOA vice president keeps blocking my driveway. Got a delivery truck waiting. Want me to send a cruiser? Not yet. Just making it official in case this escalates. Copy that. Logging it now. You do what you have to do, Chief. That last word, Chief, brought back an old part of me. The part Karen didn't know existed. I hung up, slipped my phone into my pocket, and looked at the delivery driver. Give me 10 minutes. He blinked. 10 minutes for what? To move the problem. I walked into the garage and there it was, the old yellow Massey Ferguson tractor. Its paint faded, tires a little dusty, but the engine still strong. My father used to call it the equalizer. That day, the name made perfect sense. Emily followed me in, frowning. Frank? No. Emily. No, she said, crossing her arms. You're not serious. I'm done letting her push. It's time to push back. Literally. Exactly. She sighed. You'll get yourself arrested. No, I said with a grin, climbing up onto the seat. I'll get myself satisfaction. The tractor roared to life, coughing smoke like an old dragon waking up from a nap. I eased it forward out of the barn and down the gravel path. The sound alone made neighbors peek from their windows. Karen must have heard it too, because she stepped back outside, holding her coffee cup mid-sip. What do you think you're doing? She shouted over the engine. Moving an obstruction, I said, voice calm as steel. You touch my car, and I'll have you arrested. I smiled. Perfect. That'll make the paperwork easier. I positioned the tractor's bucket right under the front bumper of her Lexus. The driver on the road just sat there wide-eyed, phone out, filming everything. Frank, Emily yelled from the porch. Be careful. I waved a hand. Always am. Karen ran closer, shouting, Stop it right now. That's private property. I leaned out of the cab. You said it was community access. I'm just accessing it. Her face turned redder than a stop sign. You're insane. The bucket slid under the car with a screech of metal. The tractor growled as I lifted slightly. The Lexus tilted, its front wheels leaving the ground. Karen screamed, Frank, put it down. I revved the engine and gave the bucket a slow, deliberate nudge forward. The car rolled a few feet, the gravel crunching underneath, and then, with a gentle tilt, the entire SUV slid sideways into the shallow drainage ditch by the road. It wasn't damaged. Not crushed, not destroyed, just very, very stuck. The crowd of neighbors that had gathered started whispering and gasping. One guy even clapped quietly. Karen stood frozen, mouth open, speechless for the first time since moving in. I shut off the tractor, climbed down, and brushed off my hands. "Driveway's clear now," I said to the delivery driver. He blinked, then burst out laughing. That was the best thing I've seen all year. Karen was still screaming as I walked past her. "You're finished, Frank. You hear me? Finished." I turned slightly and said, "Then you'd better call the cops." And she did. Which, funny enough, was exactly what I wanted. Because the last time I'd worn a badge in this county, my nameplate didn't say Frank. It said Chief Davis. It didn't take long. Maybe 10 minutes after Karen's screaming match ended, I heard the distant wail of sirens echoing down Willow Creek Drive. Emily peeked through the curtain. "She really called them." "Good," I said calmly, wiping grease from my hands. "Saves me the trouble." The neighbors started gathering along the sidewalks like it was a small-town parade. Phones out, whispers spreading. Everyone knew something was about to go down. Karen, of course, stood proudly beside her half-ditched Lexus, still clutching her phone like a badge of victory. When the two sheriff's cruisers pulled up, she rushed forward like she was welcoming old friends. "Officers, thank goodness. I need this man arrested immediately." One of the deputies stepped out, adjusting his sunglasses. I recognized him instantly, Deputy Lyle, the same one I'd spoken to that morning. Karen didn't notice. "He used that tractor," she shouted, pointing dramatically, "to attack my vehicle. He endangered me, my property, and this entire neighborhood. Arrest him." Lyle looked past her, then at me. "Morning, Chief." The way he said it stopped Karen mid-sentence. Her smile twitched. "I'm sorry, what did you just call him?" Lyle grinned. "Chief Davis. Used to run this county's department before I joined. Man taught me half the procedures we use today. You could have heard a pin drop." Karen blinked, her confidence draining like air from a flat tire. He said he was retired." I nodded. "That's right, retired chief. But still know the law well enough to spot a false report." Lyle leaned on his cruiser door. "So, Mrs. Truman, you want to tell me what happened here?" Karen stammered. He lifted my car with a tractor. That's destruction of property. You have to do something." Lyle walked over to the ditch, inspected the SUV, then looked back at her. "No damage, no dents, no scratches. Looks like it was gently relocated." "Relocated?" she shrieked. "He flipped my car into a ditch." Lyle straightened up. "Ma'am, your car's blocking a public driveway. That's a violation under Local Ordinance 12B. Technically, Mr. Davis was within his right to remove the obstruction, especially after prior complaints were filed." Her jaw dropped. "That's ridiculous." He tilted his head. "Not as ridiculous as calling the sheriff on your own HOA violation." The crowd laughed quietly. Phones were recording everything now. Karen's face turned bright red. "I'll have your badge for this," she snapped. Lyle smirked. "Then I'll let the chief handle that paperwork." She spun toward me, shaking. "You think you're clever? You think you've won?" I stepped forward slowly, calm, controlled, the way you do when the power has already shifted. "Karen," I said softly, "I didn't want to embarrass you. I tried to be patient. I tried to let you handle things your way. But you don't understand boundaries. So let me make one clear." Her lip trembled. "You're threatening me now?" "No," I said. "I'm promising you something. This ends today." I pulled a folded piece of paper from my pocket and handed it to Lyle. "Filed this yesterday. Formal complaint to the HOA Ethics Committee, backed with signatures from 9 homeowners. Every fine, every unauthorized photo, every abuse of position. It's all documented." Lyle nodded. "Already forwarded to the county's Housing Commission. They'll be reviewing her conduct." Karen's voice cracked. You can't do this to me. I am the HOA." I smiled faintly. "Not anymore." Lyle turned to her. "Ma'am, until the review's complete, you're suspended from all HOA duties. I'll escort you home while we process the report." "You can't suspend me," she screamed. This is harassment. But her words fell flat. The neighborhood wasn't on her side anymore. Even Mrs. Patterson, her loyal gossip partner, quietly turned away. As Lyle guided her toward her front door, I could still hear her shouting, "You'll regret this. You'll all regret this." When the cruisers finally pulled away, the street erupted in quiet laughter and applause. A few neighbors came over, cautious at first, then smiling. One guy from 3 houses down clapped me on the shoulder. "That was the most satisfying thing I've ever seen. You really dumped her car in a ditch." "Gently placed it," I corrected with a grin. "Physics did the rest." Emily shook her head, trying not to laugh. "You're impossible." "Maybe," I said, "but at least the driveway's clear." The next morning, the HOA president, Greg, showed up at my door with a folder. He looked embarrassed but relieved. "Frank," he said, "I wanted you to see this." Inside was an official HOA memo, Notice of Immediate Leadership Restructure. Karen had been removed from her position pending investigation. Greg sighed. "You were right. She's been overstepping for months. We just didn't realize how bad it was until you pushed back." I nodded. "People like her only get power when no one stands up to them." He smiled faintly. "Well, consider her stood up to." That evening, I walked down to the end of the driveway, leaned on the tractor, and watched the sunset paint the sky in gold and red. Emily came out and handed me a cold beer. "So," she said, "what happens next?" I took a sip, the cold fizz cutting through the day's heat. "Nothing," I said. "Peace and quiet, just like before." She laughed. "You think she'll give up that easily?" I grinned. "If she doesn't, I've got more ditch space." She shook her head, smiling. "You're terrible." "Yeah," I said, glancing at the tractor, "but effective." For the first time in months, the air around Willow Creek felt light again. No more notes, no more fines, no more fake authority. Just the sound of crickets, the smell of cut grass, and the hum of a tractor that had earned its rest. And somewhere down the road, a white Lexus sat quietly in a garage, probably still carrying a faint smell of ditch water and humility. A week after the tractor incident, Willow Creek Estates felt different, lighter, quieter, the kind of quiet you notice after a storm finally passes. For the first time in months, no one was side-eyeing me at the mailbox. No passive-aggressive notes, no HOA letters printed on pastel stationery, and no white Lexus blocking my driveway. The neighborhood had collectively exhaled. Karen's house, on the other hand, looked abandoned. Curtains drawn. No morning dog walks. No clipboard patrols. Even Marshmallow, her little white dog, hadn't been seen since the day of the police visit. Most folks figured she was laying low, waiting for the investigation to blow over. But word spreads fast in small communities and faster in HOA neighborhoods. By Wednesday, the rumors had started trickling in. "Did you hear?" Mrs. Patterson whispered to Emily at the grocery store. "Karen got suspended from the HOA indefinitely." Emily smiled politely. "Indefinitely?" "Oh yes," Patterson said, lowering her voice. "Turns out she'd been using HOA funds for personal expenses. Landscaping, gift cards, even a new fence." Emily tried not to laugh. "You don't say." That evening, she told me what she'd heard. I just nodded, half smiling. Karma doesn't need directions. It finds its own way. 2 days later, I got an email from Greg, the HOA president. Subject: outcome of the HOA investigation. Dear Mr. Davis, the board has completed its review. Mrs. Truman has been removed from all leadership positions and fined for misuse of HOA funds. Additionally, the board will be amending the bylaws to prevent future unilateral enforcement by any single officer. We appreciate your patience and documentation throughout this process. Respectfully, Greg Thompson, HOA President. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled slowly. For months, she'd built herself up as untouchable, the queen of the cul-de-sac. Now she was dethroned by her own arrogance. Emily peeked over my shoulder at the email. "So, she's officially done?" "Looks that way," I said. No more fines, no more fake rules. The kingdom has fallen. She smiled. Guess that makes you the new sheriff of Willow Creek. I chuckled. No, I'm retired from that life. I just like my driveway clear. The next morning, I heard a knock on the door. When I opened it, there stood Deputy Lyle, the same one from the incident, holding a clipboard and wearing a grin. Morning, Chief, he said. Mind if I come in? Sure thing, Lyle. What's up? He stepped inside, glancing around the living room. Just wanted to let you know that HOA investigation went countywide. Apparently, Karen's been reported in 3 other neighborhoods before moving here. She's got a history of stirring trouble and then jumping ship when things get hot. Emily blinked. You're kidding. Lyle shook his head. Nope. County Commissioner's office is involved now. Misuse of HOA funds counts as fraud in this district. They're building a case. I whistled. Looks like the ditch wasn't the only thing she ended up in. Lyle grinned. Figured you'd appreciate the update. Thought I'd deliver it in person. Before he left, he handed me a small envelope. Inside was a photo, a snapshot someone had taken during the day of the incident. It showed my tractor mid-lift, Karen screaming in the background, and half the neighborhood watching in awe. At the bottom, someone had written in marker, "Don't mess with the chief." I couldn't help laughing. You guys framed this? Lyle shrugged. Morale booster down at the station. Folks love a good HOA justice story. That weekend, the neighborhood threw a small block party. The first one since Karen had joined the HOA. Tables lined the street, kids rode bikes freely, and people were finally talking again without fear of being reported. Greg came over, paper plate in hand. Frank, I've got to say, that tractor should get its own parking spot at the next HOA meeting. I grinned. Long as I don't have to pay a fine for it. Everyone laughed. The tension that had once choked the street had finally turned into something else. Community. Later that evening, when the sun dipped low and the laughter faded, Emily and I sat on the porch again. The cicadas were back, singing their endless summer song. She leaned her head on my shoulder. Feels good to have peace again. Yeah, I said, almost like the old days. She smiled. So, what happens if another Karen moves in? I chuckled. Simple. I'll give her a tour, starting with the ditch. She laughed so hard she nearly spilled her drink. A week later, I saw a moving truck outside Karen's house. No fanfare, no goodbye notes, no final threats. Just boxes, movers, and the faint echo of defeat. As the truck pulled away, I stood at the edge of my driveway, not out of spite, but out of closure. For months, she'd made my life miserable, all for a sense of control she never really had. Now, all that control had slipped through her fingers like gravel on the road. Emily joined me, slipping her arm through mine. She's really gone? Yep. Good riddance. Agreed. We stood there for a while, watching the dust settle. I looked at my old tractor parked near the barn, sunlight gleaming off its hood. Funny thing, I said. I bought that machine to move dirt. Didn't think I'd use it to move egos. Emily smiled. Best investment you ever made. That night, as I locked up the barn, I looked over the now empty street. Peaceful. Calm. Just how it used to be. The kind of quiet that only comes after standing your ground the right way. I patted the tractor one last time and whispered, "We did good, old friend." And as the cicadas hummed and the moonlight brushed the road, one thought crossed my mind. Sometimes, justice doesn't need a courtroom. Sometimes it just needs a steady hand, a sturdy tractor, and one man who's done being pushed around. The following Friday evening, I was working in the garage when I heard the sound that had become almost nostalgic. Tires crunching on gravel. I looked up from my workbench and frowned. A sheriff's cruiser was rolling up the driveway. Emily peeked out the kitchen door, concern flickering in her eyes. You expecting anyone? No, I said, wiping my hands on a rag. But I've got a feeling who's behind it. The cruiser came to a stop. The officer stepped out, tall, serious-looking, hand resting casually on his belt. His name tag read S. Jenkins. Evening, sir, he said politely. Are you Mr. Frank Davis? That's me, I said. What can I do for you? He pulled a folded paper from his clipboard. We got a complaint filed by a Mrs. Karen Truman. She claims you intentionally damaged her property and caused emotional distress. I couldn't help but grin. Of course she did. Jenkins raised an eyebrow. That reaction tells me you've heard this song before. I chuckled. Yeah. Just didn't think she'd still be singing after the HOA booted her. He glanced toward the barn, where the yellow tractor sat like a sleeping beast. Mind if I take a look around? Not at all, I said. You'll find nothing but good soil and better memories. He smirked slightly. Appreciate the cooperation. As he inspected the area, Emily joined me outside, whispering, She's still trying? Yep, I said. Some people don't know when to stop digging their own hole. A few minutes later, Jenkins came back, expression unreadable. Her report said you flipped her SUV violently, endangering her safety. I nodded toward the road. You'll notice the ditch is about 2 feet deep. She wasn't in the vehicle. No collision marks, no structural damage, and about 10 witnesses filmed it. He paused. You have those witnesses? More than that, I said, pulling out my phone. I've got video, timestamps, and the HOA investigation summary. Want me to forward it? His eyes widened a little. You were a cop, weren't you? I smiled faintly. Chief, actually. That got a low whistle out of him. No wonder this report looks cleaner than half the paperwork I get from the department. He skimmed the documents I handed over, then sighed. All right, between this and the prior case logs from Deputy Lyle, I can already tell this is a false report. Emily crossed her arms. So what happens now? He folded the papers neatly. We'll need a formal statement, but honestly, this looks more like harassment than anything else. The county's already investigating her HOA misconduct. This just adds fuel to the fire. As if on cue, a familiar voice screeched from the road. There he is. That's him. That's the man who attacked me. Karen. She came marching up the driveway in full dramatic mode. Sunglasses, scarf, clipboard clutched like evidence of her sainthood. 2 other officers followed her, clearly trying to calm her down. Mrs. Truman, Jenkins said evenly. We've already reviewed your report. She cut him off. Good. Then arrest him. That man tried to kill me. Jenkins blinked slowly. You weren't even in the vehicle. That's not the point, she snapped. He's a danger to this community. Actually, I said, stepping forward. This community seems a lot safer since you stopped running it. She spun toward me, trembling with rage. You think you've won, don't you, Frank? You embarrassed me in front of everyone. You ruined my reputation. I met her eyes. Calm. Controlled. No, Karen. You ruined it yourself. I just stopped pretending not to notice. The other 2 officers exchanged glances. One leaned into Jenkins and whispered, That's the guy Lyle was talking about, right? The retired chief. Jenkins nodded. Karen saw the exchange and went pale. Chief? She repeated, her voice cracking. That's right, I said. Chief Davis. Retired, but still licensed. I spent 20 years dealing with people who thought the rules didn't apply to them. You remind me of a few. For a moment, the only sound was the rustling of leaves and the distant hum of a lawnmower down the street. Then Jenkins cleared his throat. Mrs. Truman, given the conflicting reports and the lack of evidence supporting your claim, I'm advising you to withdraw your complaint. She shook her head wildly. You can't be serious. He humiliated me. He shrugged. That's not a crime. Filing false reports, though. He let the sentence hang. Karen's expression faltered. I didn't mean. He raised a hand. Ma'am, I'm going to stop you there. Anything else you say might make this worse. The other officers gently stepped forward, one taking her arm as Jenkins began reading from his notes. Mrs. Truman, you're being cited under Section 32 to 19 for filing a knowingly false police report. She froze. You can't. Oh, we can, Jenkins said calmly. And we will. You'll need to appear in county court next month. Her voice cracked. You're all against me. No, ma'am, Jenkins said, handing her a citation slip. We're just done being in your way. As they escorted her back toward the cruiser, she turned one last time, pointing a shaking finger at me. This isn't over, Davis. You'll regret this. I smiled softly. You've been saying that for months. So far, I'm still waiting. She sputtered something incoherent, then disappeared behind the closing cruiser door. The car pulled away slowly, siren off. The only sound left was the soft rumble of the tractor cooling in the barn. Jenkins turned back to me, tucking his notebook away. You know, Chief, I've seen a lot of HOA disputes, but that's the cleanest takedown I've ever witnessed. I chuckled. Sometimes you don't need force, just gravity and patience. He grinned. You ever think about coming back to the department? Not a chance, I said. The only badge I wear now is peace and quiet. He laughed, shook my hand, and headed back to his cruiser. Emily stepped up beside me, watching the taillights fade. So, that's finally it? Yeah, I said, exhaling. That's finally it. She nudged me playfully. Admit it. Part of you's gonna miss the excitement. I smiled. Maybe, but not the paperwork. We both laughed, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I looked around and saw Willow Creek exactly how it was meant to be. Calm, simple, and honest. The chaos was gone. The peace had returned. And for once, the good guys didn't need a courtroom or a fight to win. Just a tractor. And a little bit of patience. You'd think after getting cited by the sheriff, Karen would have learned her lesson. But people like her don't bow out quietly. They drag the curtain down with them. A few weeks passed peacefully. No more drama. No letters. No HOA surveillance. Then one afternoon, Greg, the HOA president, knocked on my door holding a stack of papers and looking like he'd just aged 10 years. Frank, he said, rubbing his temples. You might want to attend the next board meeting. Why? I thought the HOA was finally quiet. He sighed. It was, until Karen demanded a hearing to clear her name. County ordered it open to the public since it involves misuse of community funds. Emily, standing behind me, smirked. So, she's hosting her own trial? Greg nodded grimly. Exactly. And judging by how many neighbors are talking about it, this one's going to be standing room only. That Thursday evening, the community hall was packed. Dozens of residents filled the chairs, whispering and trading glances. Phones were out, cameras ready. It wasn't just a meeting, it was the neighborhood event of the year. Karen sat at the front, flanked by two lawyers who looked like they regretted taking her case. Her hair was perfect, her smile brittle, and her eyes locked on me the moment I entered the room. Well, if it isn't the tractor man himself, she said under her breath as I passed. I smiled calmly. Evening, Mrs. Truman. Ready for your performance? She scowled. You think this is funny? When this is over, you'll wish you'd never embarrassed me. I already don't, I said. I took a seat near the back, right beside Greg, who whispered, Try not to enjoy this too much. No promises. The hearing began. Karen's lawyer stood up first, trying to spin the narrative. My client, he said dramatically, was simply enforcing neighborhood standards in good faith. Any misunderstandings were due to a lack of communication from the HOA board itself. Greg frowned. So she didn't misuse funds? Of course not, the lawyer said quickly. Any irregularities in bookkeeping were clerical, not intentional. Then came the county auditor, a woman in a navy suit carrying a thick binder. She placed it on the table with a heavy thud. We've reviewed the financials, she said firmly. Over $12,000 in HOA funds were transferred to private accounts associated with Mrs. Truman. Several payments labeled beautification projects were traced to personal purchases, landscaping, furniture, and vehicle detailing services. The crowd gasped. Phones went up. Karen went pale but forced a laugh. Those were reimbursements. I advanced funds for HOA events. The auditor's eyebrow rose. Events that never happened? Her lawyer shifted uncomfortably. My client may have bookkeeping errors, but this hardly constitutes fraud. The auditor flipped a page. She also charged the HOA $1,800 for community vehicle cleaning. The same week her white Lexus was serviced at a detail shop. Gasps again. This time, laughter followed. Someone in the back whispered, "Guess that ditch wasn't the only thing she tried to clean up." Karen slammed her hands on the table. "This is outrageous. You're all conspiring against me." Greg spoke calmly. "No, Karen. We're just finally listening." The county representative cleared her throat. "Given the evidence, the board has the authority to vote on permanent removal and restitution." Karen stood abruptly. "You can't vote me out. I am the HOA. I couldn't help it." I laughed. Out loud. So did half the room. She turned, glaring daggers. "You think this is funny, Chief?" I met her stare. "No, ma'am. I think it's justice with good timing." Her lawyer whispered urgently to her, "Karen, sit down. You're making this worse." But she wouldn't. She kept ranting. "You're all cowards. Every one of you. I built this neighborhood's reputation, and you're letting him destroy it." She jabbed a finger toward me. But by now, no one was listening. Phones were recording. Laughter rippled through the room. Even the county rep looked amused. Greg finally stood. "All in favor of permanent removal and restitution?" Every hand in the room went up except hers. Karen froze. Her face turned crimson. "You can't do this. You can't." Greg cut her off. "Majority rules. You're officially removed from the HOA board, effective immediately. The county will handle the financial recovery." The room burst into applause. Some even whistled. Karen stood there, shaking, her voice trembling with rage. "You'll regret this. All of you." Then, in one last act of pride, she grabbed her clipboard, shoved it under her arm, and stormed out of the hall, cameras flashing as she went. The door slammed so hard it echoed. After the meeting, people started coming up to me. "Frank, you were right all along. Man, that was better than TV. Think she'll come back?" I smiled. "If she does, I've still got the tractor." Emily elbowed me. "Don't tempt fate." 2 weeks later, a moving truck showed up at Karen's house again. For the last time. No goodbye, no fanfare. Just boxes and silence. By noon, she was gone. The neighborhood threw another block party that weekend. Not to celebrate her leaving, but to celebrate peace returning. As kids ran around and the grill smoked in the background, Greg raised a toast. To quiet driveways, honest neighbors, and retired chiefs who know how to handle things the right way. Everyone laughed and cheered. I just smiled, raised my glass, and said, "To staying grounded." Later that evening, as the sun dipped low and the crickets started their song, Emily and I sat on the porch again. She leaned against me, smiling. "So, you happy it's finally over?" "Yeah," I said. "Feels good to see the world balance itself again." She grinned. "You think she learned her lesson?" I looked at the tractor parked nearby, the sunset glinting off its metal. "Oh, she learned," I said softly. "Some lessons stick harder when you have to dig yourself out of them." Emily laughed. "You're terrible." "Maybe," I said, smiling, "but admit it. That was one heck of a ride." And just like that, Willow Creek Estates went back to what it was always meant to be: peaceful, neighborly, and free from tyranny disguised as community service. And me? I went back to fixing engines, mowing lawns, and watching sunsets with Emily. Finally enjoying the kind of silence that only comes after justice, and a perfectly executed dose of public humiliation. It's funny how quiet feels different once you've earned it. Before all this chaos, peace was just background noise, something I never really appreciated. But now, every rustling leaf, every humming bird, every distant tractor engine feels like a reward. It's been 3 months since the Karen Chronicles ended, as the neighbors jokingly call it. Life in Willow Creek Estates finally returned to normal, or maybe it found a better version of normal. The lawns looked greener, the smiles were real, and people actually waved again without checking who was watching. The community that once felt tense and divided suddenly felt like a neighborhood again. Karen? She didn't last long in town after that meeting. Word got around faster than wildfire, not just in our neighborhood, but across the county. Turns out, she'd been on the HOA boards of 2 other communities before ours. And in both, she'd resigned right before investigations started. But this time, there was no escaping it. The county ethics committee found her guilty of financial misconduct, and she was ordered to repay every cent she'd taken, plus legal fees. From what Greg told me, she sold the Lexus to cover part of it. I heard she moved into a rental house a few towns over, far away from any HOA. Maybe she finally learned that control doesn't equal respect. As for the neighborhood, something amazing happened after she left. The HOA, which used to be her personal empire, became something useful. Greg, now the acting president, created a transparency policy, all finances posted publicly. Meetings became community discussions instead of interrogations. They even started a new tradition, Neighbor Appreciation Week, where everyone helped clean, plant flowers, and share meals. When he first suggested it, I laughed. "So you're turning tyranny into teamwork?" He grinned. "Exactly. Thanks to you, we all realized the HOA is supposed to serve people, not rule them. And for the first time, I believed it. My days returned to simple pleasures. Coffee on the porch, fixing engines in the garage, driving the tractor down the path just to hear it hum. Every now and then, I'd catch a neighbor walking by, raising a hand and joking, 'Keep that tractor in park, Chief. Don't need another ditch rescue.' We'd both laugh, but deep down, I knew they respected me. Not for what I did, but for why I did it. Because sometimes, standing up for yourself doesn't mean shouting. It means staying calm while the storm rages, and letting truth do the heavy lifting." One afternoon, Greg stopped by with a gift, a small wooden plaque. It read, "Frank Davis, the man who moved mountains and SUVs." I couldn't help but laugh. "You're kidding." He shook his head. "Nope." Everyone chipped in. "You earned it." Emily hung it right above my workbench in the garage. Every time I see it, I smile. Not because of the words, but because it reminds me that doing the right thing still matters, even when it's messy. About a month later, I got a letter handwritten, no return address. The handwriting looked familiar. It said, "Frank, you were right. I let power go to my head. I thought people respected me because they had to. I see now that real respect is earned. I'm starting over, no boards, no titles, no HOA meetings. Just me, my dog, and some quiet. For what it's worth. I'm sorry, Karen." I read it twice. Emily asked, "You believe her?" I folded it neatly and said, "Doesn't matter. Sometimes, sorry is just the last word in a long sentence." We decided not to frame that one. As the weeks passed, the ditch where her Lexus once sat grew over with grass and wildflowers. It almost looked beautiful now, nature's way of erasing old scars. Sometimes I'd glance at it while mowing and think, that's where peace started growing again. Emily teased me one evening. "You know, you could write a book about this whole ordeal." I chuckled. "And what would I call it? Revenge of the Tractor?" She laughed. "No. How to Handle a Karen Without Losing Your Cool." "Catchy," I said, "but I think I'll stick to storytelling on the porch." Now, when I see new families moving into Willow Creek, I wave, lend a hand, and tell them, "Don't worry. The neighborhood's friendlier than it used to be." They always smile, unaware of the legend behind that statement. But every once in a while, an old neighbor will wink at me and say, "Hey, Chief, got that tractor ready?" And I just smile, because they all know peace isn't free. It's defended. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the fields turned gold, Emily and I sat on the porch swing, listening to the soft hum of summer. She looked at me and said, "You ever miss being chief?" I thought for a second. "Not really. I get to enforce better laws now." "Like what?" she asked, smiling. "Common sense, decency, respect." She laughed. "Not a bad code to live by." We sat there quietly, watching the sky fade into orange and purple. "Funny thing," I said softly. "I used to think peace came from staying out of trouble. Turns out, real peace comes from standing up. Just once, when it truly matters." She smiled. "Guess that's why everyone listens to your stories. I looked out at the old tractor resting in the barn, the evening light glinting off its hood. Nah, I said. They don't listen to me. They just love a good ending. There's something about peace after chaos that hits different. When you've lived through noise, real noise, the kind that shakes your patience and tests your character, silence becomes more than a sound. It becomes a blessing. It had been 6 months since the whole HOA saga ended, and life in Willow Creek had settled into the kind of calm most people dream about. The mornings smelled of fresh dew and pine. The evenings were painted in gold, stretching long shadows across the yard. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I could walk outside without checking for a white Lexus parked across my driveway. Emily once told me, "You don't realize how heavy stress is until you finally put it down." She was right. I didn't even notice how much that feud had drained me until the weight was gone. Now, the only thing I carried was gratitude and maybe a bit of perspective. One evening, I was sitting out on the porch, same old spot, coffee in hand, watching the sun melt into the trees. The cicadas were singing, and the world was still. The old tractor sat parked beside the barn, shining faintly under the warm light. Emily came out and joined me. "You've been quiet tonight," she said softly. "Just thinking," I replied. "About her." I shook my head. "About everything. About how one person can cause so much chaos just by needing control. And how peace isn't about what you have. It's about what you protect." She smiled. "You always turn trouble into philosophy." I grinned. "Guess I've had time to practice." We sat there in comfortable silence for a while, the kind that doesn't need words. After a few minutes, I got up and walked over to the tractor. My hand brushed the cool metal, the same way it had on the day it all began. Funny, I thought. This machine was built to move dirt, but it ended up moving a lot more than that. It moved pride. It moved justice. And somehow it moved the whole neighborhood back to its senses. I turned back toward the porch. "You know, I said, "my dad used to say, a man's strength isn't measured by what he lifts, but by what he lets go." She tilted her head. "So what did you let go?" I thought for a moment. Anger. Maybe a bit of ego, too. It's easy to fight someone like Karen. It's harder to forgive them in your own heart afterward. Emily smiled. "Sounds like you finally did." I nodded. "Yeah, took a while. But holding on to bitterness is like keeping an engine running with no oil. Sooner or later, it seizes you up." She laughed softly. "You and your tractor metaphors. What can I say? Works every time." The next morning, I decided to take the tractor out for a slow drive down the back road. Something I hadn't done in months. The air was crisp, the sun just peeking over the horizon. As the tires rolled over the dirt, I passed the ditch, the infamous spot. It was covered now in grass and wildflowers, swaying gently in the breeze. You'd never know it was once the center of the storm. I slowed down, smiled, and tipped my cap toward it. "That'll do, old friend," I murmured. "That'll do." Later that week, I got invited to speak at a small town meeting, not about the HOA, but about community values. Greg had recommended me. When I stood in front of the crowd, I didn't talk about fines, cars, or ditches. I talked about patience, about how strength isn't loud, about how every neighborhood, every workplace, every family has a Karen, someone who tests your calm, your kindness, your limits, and how the real victory isn't proving them wrong. It's keeping your peace while they lose theirs. The audience stayed silent, the good kind of silence, the kind that means they were listening, not just hearing. When I finished, Greg clapped first, then everyone followed. It wasn't loud applause, just warm, real. And I realized then, the story wasn't really about Karen at all. It was about all of us. About standing your ground without losing your grace. About knowing when to act, when to wait, and when to walk away. That night, back home, I found Emily waiting on the porch swing. She smiled and said, "Heard you gave quite a speech, Chief." I chuckled. "I just told the truth." "Still sounds like the chief to me," she teased. I sat beside her and looked up at the stars. Nah, just a man who finally learned the value of peace. She rested her head on my shoulder. "And tractors." I laughed. especially tractors. We stayed there a long time, watching the sky fade to black, the quiet wrapping around us like an old friend. And as the cool night breeze brushed against my face, I couldn't help but think, sometimes life gives you a storm not to break you, but to clear your view. And when the dust finally settles, what's left isn't what you lost. It's who you became. When all the noise fades, and the drama settles into memory, you start to realize something simple. Peace was never about winning. It was about knowing what's worth fighting for, and what's worth letting go. I used to think standing up for yourself meant shouting louder, pushing harder, proving a point. But now I know real strength isn't in your voice. It's in your stillness. Because when the world throws a Karen in your path, whether it's a nosy neighbor, a difficult boss, or someone who just can't stand seeing you happy, the easiest thing to do is fight back in anger. But anger burns fast. Patience, though, patience builds power. The kind of power that doesn't need revenge. It just waits. And when the right moment comes, it speaks softly but firmly and the world listens. That tractor didn't flip a car to humiliate someone. It flipped a moment of arrogance into a lesson. It showed that respect isn't taken, it's earned. Karen learned that lesson the hard way. And maybe, in some strange way, I did too. Because peace doesn't mean avoiding trouble. It means facing it, calmly, confidently, with both hands steady on the wheel. You don't need to be a chief or a cop, or even someone with authority to make things right. You just need to stand for what's fair, even when no one else will. These days, I sit on my porch and watch the sun dip low behind the pines. And I think about how simple life really is when you stop letting other people's storms pull you under. The world will always have noise, arrogant voices, unfair rules, petty battles. But you don't have to join the noise to prove your worth. You prove it by staying grounded, by keeping your integrity intact, by choosing calm over chaos. Because in the end, peace isn't something you find. It's something you build choice by choice, moment by moment. So if you ever find yourself standing in your own driveway moment, trapped, cornered, tested, remember this story. You don't have to match someone's arrogance with anger. You don't have to shout louder to be heard. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stay steady, stay kind, and stay true to yourself. Let them dig their own ditch. You just keep your ground clear. Because life's too short to waste on people who mistake control for strength, and far too beautiful to live without peace.